All right. We're live. It happened.
Awesome.
It is happening. It is currently happening.
We did it.
Oh my goodness. A little bit of technical issues at the front there, but I think we got it. Hopefully I'll wait for a text from my teammate to see if we actually got it, but I think we did. So Rocky, thank you for coming on. Yeah, we are. There we go. I'm getting the background now. Okay. Rocky, thank you for coming on, dude. This is awesome. I'm excited to do this. We had some technical difficulties up front, but here we are. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. It's good to see your face via the internet. And
Yeah.
good to talk again. It's
Yeah.
been quite the few months since we last spoke. Unbelievable.
Neither one of us would have predicted that this is where we would be 5 months ago, so almost 6 months ago now when we spoke. I think we spoke early January.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of like why I wanted to do this. One, on a selfish reason, like I wanted to talk to you, kind of see how you've been adapting to and adjusting to what's going on and just learn from you. But then on another level, like, I don't know about you, but sometimes I'll be listening to podcasts and I'll hear this like great dialogue back and forth. And then I find myself thinking, okay, now ask her this. And of course the host goes in like a completely different direction. So I thought it'd be cool to give our listeners, my mom and her husband, an opportunity. She doesn't even listen to it actually. So, but to give them an opportunity to kind of like ask what I didn't ask,
Yeah.
And so we put this thing out and said, hey, like, what are the questions that you want me to ask Rocky? How do you want me to follow up? And then also, like we were talking about, so much has happened since January. I mean, it was a different time.
Yeah.
There's been stuff that's happened obviously globally, nationally, and then of course locally. It's impacted both our cities, certainly Minneapolis more than San Diego. So I kind of want to touch on those and ask some follow-up questions from our listeners. You good with that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it's so funny to think. I mean, January feels like eons ago, and I
Yeah.
think I was listening to the podcast, and you've really found a rhythm. By the way, you're very good at this. So any feedback I got from people that I knew to listen to it was far more about you than me. So well done.
Oh,
Uh, but I think I dared to talk about. I think I might have even used the word unprecedented before I even knew what that word meant. Like the naivete in some of those answers of like me
yeah.
thinking I was facing challenges that no one had seen before.
Right. Right.
It's
Right.
just crazy. It's
Yeah.
just crazy. I also think I said this to you before. I think I had my first swear word inside of 4 minutes, so I apologize to your mom for
Yeah.
that.
No. Yeah. She was very
Sorry.
upset about that. She's sending a bar of soap your way. In our episode, there was this concept that you brought up that I hadn't heard before, but this, anthropological concept of liminal space. And I had to do some reading on it and looked it up. And you talked about it as like this concept where it's really clear that it's an anthropological term. So culture's traditions and ways of existence are kind of outmoded, right? It's something that it's not going to work anymore, but it's not exactly clear what the behaviors and rules of engagement are going to define this next stage. So you're sort of in this space of transition without some clarity on what's happening next. And obviously, since maybe late January, early February, depending on who you ask, COVID has sort of forced a reshaping of almost every economic sector around the globe and the way that we do business, and then certainly locally, but it now has become more of a moment. And as you put it earlier, a movement when we were talking pre-show about the killing of George Floyd, which happened in your city there. And I know it hit you and the team at Fallon on a different level. So we're kind of finding ourselves in another liminal space of this transition. And I'm curious, let's first look at how you've responded to the changes with COVID. And then maybe we can get into a little bit of how you've reacted and responded to the Black Lives Matter movement and all that. So how have you encouraged your team, and how have you responded to both the challenges and opportunity that COVID has presented?
Yeah, I mean, it's so interesting to think about. So the idea of liminality as a moment in time before, when it's clear that things aren't going to work the same way as they
Yeah.
once did, but we don't yet know how they're going to work again in the future. I mean, this is that on like steroids. So the immediately, and I think I talked to you about when we did the podcast about us moving into a new building
Right.
and all the work that went into thinking about open space and open seating versus offices, and what signals you send, and what kind of like just day to day, like the idea of energy flowing through a building,
Mm-hmm.
and having open space and having outdoor space, and all the thought. I mean, that was like years of going into that, and I haven't seen that building in 4 months. And
Right.
so even that, the idea of we're part of a holding company the CEO of which said we went from 125 offices to 80,000 personal offices overnight, like that.
Hmm.
And that change is, I don't think it's permanent. I don't think office culture is dead. I don't think we're never going to be together
Right.
face to face. I genuinely believe that, especially what we do for a living, the idea of ideas and creativity and the energy that happens when you bounce off of each other and get better and challenge each other and dare to have a well-meaning argument, getting emotional and excited about something.
Right.
It's hard to do this way. We're getting better at it, but it's hard to do this way. So I think we will be together again at some point, but I do think this is going to leave a mark. It is going to change the sheer volume of business trips that I take for a 2-hour meeting, where there are those ones where it's incredibly hard to describe to the people at home here. Like, you're leaving because why? And I'm like, well, I have an hour and 15-minute conversation that I need to have in person. I think we're going to get to challenge some of those. Like, what does need mean anymore? Do you really need to be in person? So that's going to, I think that'll be in the kind of the full shakeout of this. We'll eventually see. And I think we're years from seeing exactly what it looks like, and how the kind of normal state of business starts up again. But I definitely think this is going to leave a mark on how we work. So that's been interesting, but I'm struck by how so many of the things that made an organization or an individual great before are kind of just like under the magnifying glass now. So I have always used the word resilient with our culture and with the people at Fallon. I love them because it's like, it doesn't matter what the industry or a client or a weird thing on a production or an idea you thought you had sold and then got killed. They just get up off the mat, because like, you can't be good at this if you can't take rejection and just keep standing back up. And the resiliency that I've seen during this from the people at Fallon, it's just been one more thing that I'm in awe of. It's so cool. And it's the companies that are going to do well through this is if your company culture was inflexible, and if your company was used to a never-ending series of wins, if you've never had to manage through a downturn, if you've never had a kind of black swan event in your industry or in your company, it's really hard to kind of earn the calluses that it takes to get through something like this. And when I say something like this, no one could have ever guessed that it was going to be this dramatic and severe and significant and emotional and just like all the stuff. So I think that's been great. I think the resiliency and the flexibility of the people at Fallon has been really, really compelling. And it's the people that are going to do well, I think, are the ones that pick up those traits and go.
I was thinking about that as you're talking, like the concept of certainly decision-making and how decision-making has shifted and changed based off of this perspective that we now have, and the idea of what does need really mean right now. So how have you, though, like I was on a thing where they asked, the host asked me, like, when's a good time for someone to start mental skills training? And I said, the best time to start mental skills training was yesterday.
Yep.
But since yesterday has passed, it's now today. Start today, So how have you, though, like, what did you do prior to COVID, or what do you think really enabled them and your team to have resiliency now? And because it's obviously being tested in a way that it hasn't had, been before. So how did you sort of prepare them for this, right? Or how had they prepared themselves for this without knowing that this was coming?
God, it's really interesting. And it's something I wish I could somehow take credit for, but I think it's, if you are still around in the world of working at a creative advertising agency, you have learned this skill just through the very nature of being in the building and in the business.
Yeah.
Because it has been such a turbulent industry to be in for the past 15 to 20 years. Margins have shrunk. Every pitch that, used to be a pitch for $10 million that would have a handful of agencies competing. Now every pitch that's $1 million client has every agency in the industry, including the most lauded and successful ones, clamoring to get into it.
Right.
Clients have moved a lot of their marketing services in-house. So there's less of the kind of like just higher margin churn stuff. So like we've had to fight for everything that we've gotten, and to stay successful, to stay growing as a business. So I think a lot of people, and we talked about this on the podcast as well, where, it takes a level of vulnerability, but also resilience to put your ideas on the wall, and 9 times out of 10 have somebody go, that sucks, or that's off brief, or that's not right, or I've actually seen someone do that before. And just to like die a little bit inside and then take a deep breath and get back up and go, okay, here's page 2. Like, so I think the nature of our business and our industry has helped them do it. We've got a kind of one of the bright shining lights of branding and retail right down the street from us in Target. And that was a company that, growing up in the Twin Cities, I live right down the street from T1, the original Target. It's a point of pride for us in Roseville. But there was a stretch where they could do no wrong. I mean, they were a brand that knew what they were doing. They were a discount retailer, but it felt like a premium experience. They were untouchable. And then Amazon came along, the internet came along, and they really kind of like took a punch. And there was a moment in time where Target really kind of scrambled, because it was the first time that everybody in that building didn't know what it was like to be on like a winning team. It's like if the Patriots go 2-14 this year, there's a lot of people in that organization who aren't going to know what to do, because all they've known is winning. And so it's hard to know how you're.
There's a lot of people outside that organization that are going to love that. But anyway,
everybody else will be great with it. But the reality is you don't know if all you're accustomed to is the wind at your back. It's really hard to know when you get, like I said, like hit in the mouth. It's like everybody's got a plan until that happens. And Target has since then really kind of found its focus again, and has found its, I would say swagger, but like there's like it's hard to swagger when you've been through really getting kind of your teeth kicked in for a minute. And I think they've found confidence again. They found focus again. They found belief in that brand again. And like consumers can feel it. It feels like a company that is going to survive the retail apocalypse. Whereas if this would have happened to them 8-9 years ago, I don't know if it would have. And so it's always hard when all you know is winning, and all you know is year after year after year of growth. It almost just feels like it comes to you. And Fallon had that period of time too, where we could do no wrong, where clients were backing up the truck and saying, we want to do a Super Bowl spot. Here's a bunch of money. And that just, my experience, almost 20 years at Fallon, I have never been in that moment. So culturally, we have lived in an era where you have to fight for everything, for every win, for every great piece of work, for every new client, for every nickel. And I think that just breeds a more resilient, more flexible culture. So those are the ones that I think that have been hardened a bit, that are really doing well right now.
It's interesting because like I think of resilience as much as it is an intellectual exercise in sort of preparing yourself for getting punched in the mouth, right? It's much more of an experiential growth that comes from, it's an experiential skill, I should say, so it comes from getting punched in the mouth, that you learn how to like rub it off and get back up and do it again. And so I think part of this process, though, as you're talking about a little bit, and I'm hearing you talk about, is you guys have experience in redefining success. You've had to redefine what success looks like for Fallon over and over and over and over again. Whereas it didn't just come to you and like, this is okay, we're always going to have these $10 million pitches. We're always going to have this, where we're just a couple agencies vying for it. that's the thing that I think is so interesting here is like this has forced some companies and organizations and leaders, even individuals, to redefine what success looks like. And then part of that too is letting go of the old definition. Intellectually, I can redefine it and be like, okay, now success means this in terms of revenue or in terms of whatever it is. But there's this other part of this attachment to the way it was. Have you found yourself and your team like kind of longing for the outdoor deck at your, at your offices, right? And having trouble with the letting go part of things?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the I think that's the nature of the situation we're in. I don't think you can do much about that.
Yeah.
It kind of is where you choose to focus your energy. I also think people have so much coming at them
Yeah.
that having time to sit and reminisce. I mean, we are in
Right.
beyond obviously the pandemic. It's like crisis on crisis, and we're also in the middle of a real moment of kind of seeking for social justice in this country that
Yeah.
and we're in a moment of political division that I don't think we've seen in a long time.
Hmm.
And that's just the stuff that you see on NewYorkTimes.com.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're also in a moment where like we're all homeschool teachers right now. We're also in a
Mm-hmm.
moment where we're worried about like our family members and their health, and there's real worry about like individual stuff. And so it's been interesting. The more every once in a while, like I'll be downtown and I'll drive by the building, and that's when I'll
Yeah.
go, oh, because we're right by Target Field, and it's like, oh, remember
Yeah.
last year there was a ball game and we walked out and then we went up there and we had a beer. Like, oh
Right.
man,
Right.
remember ball games and doing
Right.
things. But beyond that, but that's also really tough because that hangs on you. Like if you're focused every day on the human body just isn't meant to jump from crisis to
Exactly.
crisis like that. I mean, straight up honesty, like I can feel it hanging on me a lot of
Right.
days. And so that's when you really got to try and practice even just moments of self-care, because it's really important stuff. It's not stuff where it's like, this will figure itself out. Like you
Yeah,
have to spend
exactly.
time figuring it
Right.
out, but you're worthless if you don't, go for a walk occasionally or take a deep breath or allow yourself to divert and do something else. So there has been a lot of and also just kind of the salad days of Fallon, a lot of that reminiscing of like when the agency was far more glamorous and easy. There just aren't a lot of people left that
Yeah. Right.
and that were kind of around during that period of time. So we don't do a lot of backward looking. We have such a crazy, talented, interesting, want to do good for the place they work for and the world at large group of young people at Fallon that they're
Yeah.
all forward looking. So none of us have a chance to go, well, we did a similar thing 17 years ago.
Right.
They're like, what are you even talking about? Like,
Yeah.
I was in kindergarten 17 years ago. Now I want to look at like what we're going to do for the next 10 years and the place we're going to build together.
I think that idea of like pre-COVID, this was our revenue, that stuff is like past at this moment. Like we're 4 or 5 months into this. The other thing that you were talking about is obviously crisis on crisis and the emotional toll and weight that goes with that. I was talking with a colleague friend of mine who does coaching as well. And he was saying, for my entire career, I've been able to sort of be apolitical. I've been able to kind of be on the sidelines and sort of coach from the sidelines. And you can't do that anymore. And you've got to find your North Star. You've got to kind of get in the game a little bit. And so one of the things that you talked about when we were on our episode was how you're working with embracing the uncomfortable. And back then the uncomfortable had a different meaning, right? It was kind of getting in front of a client when something goes wrong and you have to address them and you don't really know what you're going to say. And, sometimes you just have to walk in the room and go. But then now there's a little bit different kind of level of uncomfortable. And we talked about how, the killing of George Floyd has deeply affected Fallon as like an entity, as an organization, as an organism, if you will. It's sort of affected the whole company and culture, not just a few people in it.
Yeah.
And it's really challenged you as a leader. talk to me about that. How have you responded to that, and maybe embraced that the uncomfortable that comes with that?
I mean, it's been super difficult, and I certainly don't purport to know the answers, but it's a lot of it is you just kind of, I'm trying to listen a lot more than I talk. This is also that odd circumstance where I could speak from personal experience when it comes to a client loss, but when it comes to being judged and profiled based on the color of your skin, it's something I've never had to face.
Right.
And so there are a lot of people that work at Fallon who have had to face that. And so part of working our way through it together as an organization, and that's how we're doing it, is a lot of listening, a lot of attempts to understand someone else's perspective and point of view. It's supporting and leaning on partners who have already been doing work in this world and trusting in them. So we've got 2 partnerships that we've had for some time at Fallon. One with an organization called the Brand Lab, which is this great Minneapolis-based, now Minneapolis and Kansas City organization that their whole mission is to seek, and has been for 10 years, to diversify the face of advertising and marketing by bringing in candidates who wouldn't normally, some of them don't even realize that working in advertising is a job you can have. Right. Starting in high school and working internships and connections and classroom visits. And they have these great things called fearless conversations, where they come in and they sit in the middle of your company and they make you have real honest conversations with each other. But we've worked with them, the Brand Lab, for a while. And so part of this is supporting the people who have already been doing the work and helping and leaning on them, and not pretending that we, as an advertising agency, even though we were 10 minutes down the street from where this most recent, kind of the last month, started, that doesn't mean that we're suddenly authorities in this work. It suddenly doesn't mean I'm an authority in this work. And so we've been trying to find avenues and outlets and partners to help us have these conversations. And we've been taking, to be totally honest, a lot of cues from our own Black, Indigenous people of color, and trying to be really sensitive to the fact that it's going to take some time to heal. But also, there was a great line that one of our creative directors wrote, and she wrote, it was for a piece kind of around this topic, and it was in reference to the day that George Floyd was murdered, and it was on that day things changed, and we never want to go back. And I'm butchering the line; it was beautifully written, but her point was that change is kind of on the way, and it started on that day. And part of what we're trying to do is capitalize on momentum to make real change. And again, like I said, not pretend that we have the answers, but listen, figure out how to accelerate our own diversity and inclusion efforts, how to make our own building a far more inclusive place for people who don't feel like they're necessarily represented across the board. And so it's just been a lot of that. It's been a lot of exploration. It's been a lot of reading. It's been a lot of listening. It's been a lot of taking leads, and then just finding the right balance, right? Because it's I mentioned this to you earlier. I've been struck by the different reactions of people. So some people are still in a moment where they're grieving, they're angry, they need time to heal, and there are some people that have are want to funnel their energy into action, and they want to start programs. They want training opportunities right now, not in a month from now. And so part of what the difficult thing has been, this is such a personal topic to people, and trying to figure out how to apply it to a business situation that's what it's been. It's been just a little bit difficult in toggling back and forth. And God, I don't at all purport to have gotten it right, but we're trying, and like I said, we're listening a lot, and we're starting some things off. And we know, I think the cool thing about the moment in time we're at is that I think there's we kind of talked to the agency about a week ago, and we said, I went into the year with DE&I goals, and I felt good about them, and I felt like they would move the needle.
Yeah.
But in retrospect, it felt like I was checking a box. In retrospect, it felt like it was too reactive, not proactive enough. In retrospect, you know what I mean? So we're at this moment where I think it's going to be a continual thing where organizations figure out a way to, and for us, we need to have people in Fallon that represent the way that the country looks.
Yeah.
And our work gets better because of it. We talked about it. I need people, I need individuals that aren't all individually the same as one another. I want individualism, and I want we need that in our building. And I think it makes us a better agency. Certainly makes us a more creative outlet when your perspectives are different like that.
You know, one of the things we talked about on our show was that you talked about your values, you know, empathy being one of them, and certainly the family feel at Fallon. So part of that is celebrating the individuality. You know, you hire people for the weirdo side of them, but also the feel of being a family at Fallon, and the role that kind of culture sets around vulnerability, around these difficult conversations, and all that. How has the family feel, empathy, how have those shown up in your behaviors and your responses to what's been happening?
Well, the first one was, I also made I think a comment how I'm solely just the only jokes I have anymore dad jokes. And
Right.
I just looked back today at the email I sent to the agency 2 days after George Floyd, and it was, it was trying to put to words a moment where I didn't have the words, but overwhelmingly at that moment in time, because the city was really in a really volatile position. And so I look back at that email and it said, at this moment, my dad instincts are kicking in, because we have got, again, so many young people, so many young activist people, so many young people that live in the middle of the city and on the blocks where a lot of the protests were happening. And so the very first week of that kind of the last, month or so, I would get up, I would come down, sit down at this desk, start drinking coffee, and basically not get out of my pajamas for the first half of the day, because I had an Excel chart up in front of me, as did our head of HR. And we were just cross-referencing everyone's address with where the protests have moved to, many of which had gotten really kind of violent, and there was fires and people were feeling unsafe. And my overwhelming instinct to begin at early days was just physical safety of people, of course, emotional safety and all the other things that went along with it. There was so much anger and still is, but that was kind of the first step. It was like the hierarchy of needs. I needed to know where everybody was and that they were okay. And then over time, it's been, I think a part of the power of our organization is that everybody is treated and celebrated for being a human and their own humanity. Being a human, but you know what I mean? And I think part of showing that, even in these conversations we've had as an agency, there's been a vulnerability even from leadership, where there are things we don't know. There are things where we want to get it right, but can't find the words. And also, on the other side of it, for our entire staff, just opening up lines of communication. And that's kind of how we've tried to treat it. That's how we've tried to be familial. We've tried to, again, we have one of our core values. You talk a lot about values in your work, and one of our core values, we did talk about, family as a business model, but there's another one that's the belief in the dignity of the individual. And I think that one more and more is how I'm trying to remind myself of how to think about our own culture in the midst of this larger conversation around kind of systemic racism. Is the culture that represents that can first understand the individual. So if I'm in a room and we've got, and we had really honest conversations about how people can feel like they are in a environment where 95% of the people are in on the joke that's happening in the room. but that other 5% based on either their own background, the fact that they don't somehow feel included or represented in the conversation that's happening.
Yeah.
So unbeknownst to us, there's that implicit bias that comes out where you don't even know that you are excluding someone. And it's there's no malice to it, but trying to understand people so well and know how each of our individuals come to work and show up every day so that you can actually create an environment that is genuinely inclusive.
Mm-hmm.
That's a lot of the work we're doing right now. And it's really like around the edges, and it's
Fumble.
It's the wired things. And sometimes can be hard, but I think that's the important stuff that we're getting into right now.
Yeah, that's good. I think, and I think like the idea that, that I was thinking about is the idea that when you think about it that way, I'm trying to understand the individual, and I don't know what I don't know, right? But the way that I can kind of try to bridge that gap is through vulnerability and through communicating the fact that I don't know what I don't know, and trying to open the door. But what I've found and seen in some people is they're afraid to even do that. And they walk on eggshells and don't want to say anything wrong and don't want to make a mistake and all that. And they move very far away from any opportunity of not only like celebrating the individual, but understanding the individual. So we had a question come in from, I want to get to some of our kind of listener questions here, but Sienna asked, who you, in the show, you said who you are as a leader and who you are as a person are not two different people. So it's kind of on this topic of individuality. What would you tell someone who feels they have to tone down or filter their personality in the workspace? So,
I mean, it's a really good question, and not an easy one, I think, to answer. Part of everyone's, I think, journey to kind of who they become professionally is figuring out which parts of you work best in the given environment. And we talked about a little bit about how it's some of the ways I give presentation coaching. So the very first time that you present in front of a large group, it feels like you're presenting. Like I've got my presentation voice and here are the bullet points of the slide. And then everyone kind of loses they lose Eric. They'd like, where did the person I know named Eric go in this presentation bot that just got up in front of me? And I think the people that are best at presenting are the ones that just have conversations and can stand up and convey that information in a way that's meant for a large audience instead of just a one-on-one conversation. And I think that the similar thing needs to happen as someone, especially as young people find ways to enter themselves into a workplace, is you have to not be afraid to be kind of real and genuine and honest about who you are just in a workplace. And there are some things, like, of course, like, the weekend version of you might have slightly rougher edges that you need to tone down. And also part of it is sometimes we walk in with predispositions that actually don't work with the other people they're not understanding to the other person in a conversation. So part of it is not just you not being yourself, it's also you leaving room for the other person that you're working with. So that's where you kind of have to just be careful. But I think by and large, my answer to that question is be as much of yourself as humanly possible in your workplace. And if you feel like you can't do that, you have to be a completely different person, and especially if you don't like how that person feels, you need to do something about where you're working, either working with your own employer to say, there's something about this environment that doesn't allow me to bring my full self, and or find some place that will celebrate all the idiosyncrasies and your own background and all the experience you bring to that moment. And I say that with full awareness that I still have work to do on our own environment to make sure that we are a place that insists that people do that. And we're trying. That's the work that I think as long as
Yeah.
you got to just kind of stay in it to encourage people to be as much of themselves as they possibly can every
But
day.
and that's an ongoing thing because the it changes. New people come in, some people leave. It's sort of the vibe can change and adjust, and you've got to continually work on. This is a culture that we're going to celebrate individuality, and here's how we're going to do it, and then keep that messaging going.
Yep.
On that topic, we had a couple questions come in around, the cultural cornerstone that you guys have there of fun, and so how would you respond to a leader who doesn't value fun? I know the way out of this question is, well, it depends on the industry, but
Yeah.
like, what would you do if a leader was emerging in Fallon, but he or she didn't value fun?
God, I don't know if it depends on the industry. Because,
Okay,
like, what the hell is
good.
this all for? We all work way too much to not enjoy what we do a little
Sure.
bit.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's industry specific. And I think even in industries that feel more serious than what
Right.
we do,
Right.
I still think there is joy to be found in those, and
Yeah.
and some and fun to be had with your own colleagues. I think it's actually so we've had. I'll actually answer your question in a second, but we've had one of the things that's happened in this new world is we've been having to do new business pitches like this, little
Right.
square boxes on computer
Right.
screens. And normally new business pitches are kind of what you would think they are. There's like a little bit of Draper still left in them where it's like you get like spiffed up, you work
Right.
on this presentation for weeks and months, and you are pouring tens, sometimes hundreds of thousands of dollars in both hard and soft costs into these presentations. Every detail is thought over. You're bringing sometimes half finished commercials into a
Sure.
pitch where you don't even have the business yet, and it is like performative. You are like you rehearse handoffs, and you talk about you're going to take this slide and you're going to come in here, and then how are we going to do introductions, and I mean every bit, and seating, the number of conversations I've had about who sits where. Do we want the clients there? Is it every other? That stuff is, I mean, it's absolutely pined over. All that's gone. All that is gone now. So now all you have is basically your ideas, a deck, and the people in those boxes.
Yeah.
And part of the reason we have had, I will knock on whatever wood is available to me. Part of the reason we've had actually quite a bit of success in new business in this kind of weird Zoom era of pitches is that the rapport that we have as a team, the fun that we have with one another and have had for as long as many of us have worked together isn't fake. It is not feigned. It does not need to be rehearsed. And I think clients can feel it. I think there's an ease to which a lot of the people at Fallon can kind of interact and on the fly and talk and rib and have a joke. And I think that can, I think it goes a really long way to that fun, that level of joy that we've all found professionally with one another.
Yeah.
It's gone a really long way to help our success rate, because I think the people that don't have that get found out quick. I think in the world of little squares on the screen, I think if you don't already have a rapport with one another and it doesn't feel like you were a team walking into this meeting, it's certainly going to be like, it's going to be exposed really quickly.
Yeah.
So that is part of the importance of why I think having fun matters, is that like it comes across, it actually makes us more successful.
Yeah, and I as you were talking, I was thinking about it, it's like if you have a restriction on any one core emotion, joy being one of them, you're restricting the whole self coming out, right? You're restricting that individuality, restricting connection, because I'm trying to tamper down or control or limit or restrict joy.
Yeah.
Right? It's something else is going to be overkill, right? Or it's all just going to be constricted, and there's not going to be this human connection. There's not going to be this rapport building, either between us, within us, or with the new business.
100%. And it's, I don't know, I really believe life is too short. Like if you can't, and part of why I'm still doing this is we have there's a guy who works in our media group named Mark Nelson, and I'm almost certain this is his quote. I'm going to ascribe it to him if not, but someone asked him, and he's been at Fallon. Today's his anniversary. Actually, he's been at Fallon for 24 years.
Wow.
And someone asked him a couple years ago, "Do you ever does this working in this industry ever make you feel old?" And his response was, "I think the day I stop working in this industry is when I'm going to start feeling old."
Yeah. Yeah.
And so he was so, and I believe in that. Like, this is time away from family. This is time away from loved ones. This is time away from whatever your personal hobbies and passions are to do this. And it's too much time spent to not have fun, to not find some joy in it, to not, I admit, beyond the being separated for social distancing and all those things, the moment we're in as a country right now and the realizations we're coming to really do make it, it's hard. Sometimes you almost feel guilty for finding moments of joy, but I still think you need to. I think it's going to makes everything else more effective when you can find an outlet where you can go. Someone used the term nature bathing the other day. She said that she wished that she was wishing me a weekend of relaxation and nature bathing, which is like a really kind of funny way just to say go outside because it's restorative. But I loved it. I was like, that's great. That's so ridiculous that you would wish me good nature bathing. But it's those moments of joy, of fun, of connection, of actually celebrating a win, even at a time that doesn't feel particularly celebratory. You still have to grab those moments
that's going on.
And it doesn't mean, I don't think it means that you're any less serious about the change that is required or the moment in time that we sit or the severity of any number of things that are happening. But I think it's human nature. I do think you have to find moments of levity, of joy, of fun. It's harder now, but you have to do them in order to keep pushing forward on everything else that needs to get done.
Yeah. We're getting a little scratchy with your microphone on your polo there.
Here it's
that's right. It's live TV, baby. That's the game.
One take.
That's right. So kind of on that idea of that you were talking about, like with new business and selling, we got a couple more if you still got a few minutes for us.
Yeah, for sure.
So Rick asked, what are the similarities and differences between selling an idea to your team versus selling an idea to a client? I kind of think of this as like, as a leader, I've got to, communicate stuff and suggest changes to the team, but that might look and show up a little differently than selling to a client. You've got a wry smile, so I'm excited about this.
It's a super fun one because you see it come to light in some pretty special ways sometimes. So you always have to know your audience, right? So if we're in a review internally, let's say we're at a creative review internally, you can trust that many of the people around the table with you, well, the proverbial table now, the virtual table, but can imagine what the potential of a creative idea coming to fruition.
Got it.
And many of them, especially at Fallon, will get excited at the sheer audacity of it, or the beauty of what they see in it. Or I'm going to use the example because I used it, but we talked about We Have the Meats in Arby's.
Right.
The very first time those 4 weird words that aren't really correct English, by the way, meats is not a thing. The first time that was stuck up on the wall, and the reaction to it internally. The reaction to it internally was, again, this is when Pat Fallon was still with us, and he was part of this pitch. And his reaction was basically, I'm not entirely sure what the hell that means, but I think it's going to work. Yeah. And so many of us could see so much in why it was right strategically, and why it was right creatively, why it was the right kind of stance for that brand to take. But then when you go to a client and say, here's your new tagline, We Have the Meats. And again, it doesn't say anything about deliciousness or freshness or anything. Yeah. It's this weird conglomeration of words. And the way that we sell to an outside audience, then it's different because they're thinking about the application differently. So we're now pitching to the team at Arby's and franchisees that run Arby's stores. So the way that we sold that idea to them is we went to an Arby's here locally and redressed the whole store, got permission from the manager, and basically took over all the signage in the store, redid uniforms. This is before we ever had the business.
Wow.
Redid the uniforms, put little table tents out, and then just started talking to people. And all the employees are like, we have the meats. I like that.
Yeah.
And they were making up songs, and like they had shirts that said, we'll work for bacon. And they're like, I'm not giving this back.
Right.
And like these real quotes. And so that the franchisee could see the pride that their own employee would have in standing next to a brand that said that had that level of pride, so that they could see their customers connect the dots and go, oh, meats, like with an S, so plural. So not just roast beef, meats,
right,
like turkey
right.
and ham and, oh, okay,
right.
more than one meat. And so, but you have to show, there are some people, again, they're great at running restaurants. They're not great at seeing the possibility in a creative idea. So you show them what their world looks like.
Alive.
Yeah, you take them all the way down and let them see. You don't leave it to the imagination. So a lot of selling ideas, the idea can stay the same, but the sale of the idea depends so much upon the person who's receiving that pitch, if you will.
Yeah, it's really interesting because like as you're talking about, I was thinking about it internally when we're talking about, doing a leadership training or consultation with an organization on culture. As a team internally, we can connect the dots easily and more quickly, as you were talking about. Like you can we have the meats, and the creatives in the room can sort of see how that plays, how it would look. Or how
you've got shorthand.
Exactly. And, but then when you go to a customer, they don't have that contextual awareness that you all have. So you sort of make it sticky. You kind of make it come alive in a way that they can truly connect to and experience that you don't need to do that with the team, because they could do that in their imagination, whereas 100%. Somebody who's receiving it, it's not the same.
And we also have clients who are super beholden to data. And so for those clients, we go out to a panel and we describe blindly an idea called We Have the Meats, and we explain what it would mean. And we do a series of before and afters and show them their own customers in data reacting to an idea that's not yet out in the world. So everybody's got a different trigger for what will help get them to see something. And everyone's looking for something different in it. So that's why these pitches do become big, broad things, because you might have
figure that out though. How do you figure that out?
We do a lot of like research on people. So we do a lot of going into pitches. We know who we're going into the room with. We have people on our new business team that are great at creating these like dossiers where you go and you go through their LinkedIn, you figure out their experience. You say they did a speaking panel on this. Here's a quote they have from 3 years ago where they talk about how I feel an idea with my gut, but I buy it with my brain. So show me the data. And you go, oh, this might be a person who needs to see it. So like there's a whole kind of thing that goes into it. And then when you have clients, you just know over time, there are things that they need to see. Maybe a franchisee needs to see, sure, this idea is great, but can it sell? What does it look like in a damn coupon? Because I still send coupons. So what does it look like in a coupon? And so you show them that and you say, look, you could still have fun in a coupon-like environment where it's a deal, but the idea carries it. And so everybody, and your goal in those is to check enough boxes for enough people where enough people can see themselves into the idea and they all pick it up and grab it as their own. And then the best pieces of work, that's what happens is all the stakeholders just go, oh, this is ours. And they make it their own. And then it becomes just a blast.
Yeah. Cool. So we got a couple more. We got a couple that are a little bit more about you, but there's one more about the family as a business model question. Okay. A lot of people responded really well to that. Some people were like, I don't know if that fits, but how do you deal with the reality that not every team is a complete democracy? So just like in a family, this came from Jim, just like in a family, the reality is that some people have more power or responsibilities than others, right? It's, if I left it up to Harrison and Avery, we'd be eating Chick-fil-A every night, except on Sundays. But so how do you kind of manage that within the family as a business model?
Delicately.
That's not part of it. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. It is and it isn't. I mean, there is still a structure. We are a relatively flat organization. We really are. Yeah. We don't have a ton of layers and a ton of tiers. And we do empower and listen to our employee base. And it's everything from, you know, just day to day, how decisions they want to make and how they want to run their business. But also, you know, we've got a program called Open Source, which is basically, there's this card that you fill out and it's got two hands on the steering wheel and it's like, this is yours, so drive it. And it's, what do you want to see this place do? And we take these suggestions in and we implement a lot of them. A lot of our best stuff comes from these like open source ideas. So we let people, we do our best, we really do, to let them feel like they have a say in the building that is asking so much of them.
Yeah.
But also, there does have to be decisions made. And I think you, as much as I like to think that, like, when you get the job or you get the business card with the title on it, everyone just immediately starts to listen to you. I think you earn that shit. I think you show people that you are listening to all sides, but that you are also unafraid to be decisive. And I think people see in the decisions you make the values that are hanging on the wall behind you. And in so doing, if they see that enough, they recognize and respect it. And that's the kind of leaders that we want. And that's what I want actually in the kind of next tier of leaders, is to start not being afraid to make those decisions. And sometimes when they know their own business better than I do, I have to defer to them, and I'm going to stand behind them and next to them when they make those calls. And, but I think it's something that gets earned. And at a certain point, decisions do need to be made. And you know, I think if you do it with the right intent, with the right priorities in mind, frequently enough, people kind of understand that structure, and that it's there for a reason.
Right. And then it's not like this idea of, you're not going to make everybody happy.
Yeah.
You know, you can't.
No.
But at the same time, it's what is driving the decision is for the greater good, or it's from a value, or, you know, from something else that is consistent with past behavior, past decision making, et cetera.
And if I make a decision and you don't agree with it, I'm going to take the time to explain to you why I made the decision in earnest.
Right.
But also the decision's been made. So we kind of got to move on. So like that's the, you know, and I think we have, and that's just lessons I've learned from my own, like the leaders and mentors I've had over my career is decisiveness. And though I don't maybe always agree with the end decision, I know it came from a place that was about the best thing for our people and our business. And I respect that, and I trust it, and I go, because, you know, again, those leaders had to earn that for me over a period of time.
Yeah. So we got a question here from Katie, and you know, she said part of your job is to keep your team calm. I think I'm adding this part in. I think you refer to it as sort of rolling in that common sense grenade, which I'm assuming is available for pre-order on your website. But Katie's question was, how do you keep yourself calm and focused when the stress starts to pile up? You know, you've been taking on a lot lately and feeling some heavy weight on your shoulders of late. So how are you managing your stress?
As well as humanly possible. It has been, again, like, in the spirit of being completely honest, it's been tough. It's been tough for all the leaders at the agency. And I lean on them a lot. It is incredibly helpful. I've connected with a handful of other CEOs over the past couple of years, and hearing from them even a sense of, man, this is tough, and vulnerability. And here's a place where I screwed up, and try and avoid it if you can. Yeah. It helps so much, because it can be a lonely thing, like sitting in this home office and trying not to drag it out into the rest of the house and have it land all over my family. Yeah. But it helps to know that everybody's in this position right now, and we're going to get through it. And I continue to, like, let the inner optimist in me win. And when in doubt, you know, you get outside. When in doubt, you get on the old Peloton.
Yeah. Oh God, I knew you were going to say the
I know.
Peloton.
I'm one of
I
those.
don't want
I'm
to
one of
hear it
those people
anymore.
now. I'm one of those people now. I can't help
I'm
myself.
going to become one. I feel like there's no choice at this point. But yeah,
It's my only way to blast hip hop music into my
right.
headphones that makes me feel like I'm actually in getting more fit at the same time. And you
But
know,
but
you
exercise
find
is a
moments.
good way. Exercise is a way to sort of burn off that, the emotional, the energy in motion, right? The emotions that you're carrying around with you.
Yeah,
Um, that we need to burn that off, because then we can't, if that's there, if it's driving the bus too significantly, then
yeah,
we're not going to be making balanced decisions,
yeah.
and that involve both emotion and logic
I think you need
and
to
our heart.
have a. I completely agree, because if it's cumulative, so if you were to let the what comes across most leaders' desks right now day to day be cumulative, the
Yeah.
sheer weight of it would sink you. But the if you can find a way to have a long memory on the stuff that's important,
Hmm.
like creating a more inclusive environment, like continuing to focus on new business and doing great work, like continuing on taking
Yeah.
care of people because that's what drives us, but have an incredibly short memory on the stuff that flares up those, like the stress and the cortisol and all the bad stuff in you, and try and figure out and know that those things are going to hit your desk more often than not in any given day, and
Yeah.
know that they come and they go, and that everyone will continue to move on, and you do your best to handle them. And then you just kind of got to leave them behind with that day, but keep your eye on the important things, keep your eye on the long-term, because those aren't going to change. But if you let and I'm not always great at this, to be totally honest, but trying to let those things that come at you and can kind of flare up day to day, especially in a world where there's constantly, we have issues with clients, stuff that our clients' business are dealing with. We have stuff that our
Right.
own business is dealing with, that
Right.
the world is dealing with, that every single kind of headline in your email inbox doesn't totally turn you sideways. You just have to like breathe your way through it and then move on, like kind of clear the slate and move on with the day.
So on that one, we've got this last question here, where the idea is, this came from Sarah, but the idea is kind of what you're talking about right now, where part of being a leader is making decisions. Part of being a leader is figuring out what to prioritize and what to move down the list a little bit. And you're going to have people that are going to come to you with two kind of competing ideas or whatever, that they're both incredibly passionate about, that they both want to be number one on the list here. But as a leader, how do you handle pushback and criticism on a project that you believe so passionately about? But you might not get that same kind of response from the team or from your the group that you've put around you.
That's an interesting question. The basis of it is absolutely true. There are the instinct for someone to believe that whatever is in front of them and is most important in their life and their day
Right.
is the most important thing,
Right.
is just, I think, human nature. And I think it's also part of, again, we are really accessible as a leadership group at Fallon, so that stuff comes through to us as frequently as we can let it. I think being transparent helps sometimes. So I think sometimes we don't give people enough credit for their ability to understand or empathize with us as leaders. So if someone comes to me with an idea and says, "Hey, we have to do this today," and it's important, if you look at it and understand, you're going to understand and see why this thing has to be out in the world today, or you have to make this phone call right now. I'll get that a lot, where it's like, I need you to step in and intervene. If my response is just yes or no, it's more about, I'm arguing the validity of the case you're bringing to me. Sometimes my job is to say, okay, I hear you, I agree with you, but I need you to know the three other things that just literally came in while we were talking in my inbox. Right. I'm going to read you my emails, and I need you to understand why I have to go do this other thing first before we can come back and put your thing into the world, if that makes sense. So, but again, I think you get in trouble. We do this with the client sometimes too, where the client will say, "Here's my belief," and we as an agency will say, "Here's our belief." And we think it's someone has to like be dancing around the ring with their arms up, and the other person has to be laying face down. And the reality is that, if you can bring each other into your kind of issues or your problems, it can't be an adverse relationship. It has to be, we're going to be in solving this together. And that's usually a way where, and then people, all of a sudden, the thing that's most important to you, you see that, oh, my colleague also has a thing that I recognize actually should take priority. So it's just like opening up and bringing people into the problem solving instead of going away, coming back and saying, here's the verdict.
Yeah. And that idea of like giving them the perspective that will enable either empathy or understanding. There's a concept in this book called The Outward Mindset by the Arbinger Institute. But one of the things that they talked about was how they would have like two people argue for the other side. So basically, I would argue why you should keep your budget the way it is. And you'd argue why I should keep my budget the way it is. But what it does is it really opens you up to thinking about and considering the other person's needs, challenges, whatever, and stepping into that space. Rocky, this has been amazing. I thank you so much for coming on and doing this with me. I really enjoyed it. And I know that the people watching got a lot out of it. As much as you like to purport that you don't have these like takeaways and these principles, they really shine through, and they did today. And I got a lot from it. And I think the people listening and watching did as well. So thank you.
Thank you, man. It was really fun. I appreciate it.
And we got to connect soon, hopefully in person at some point in life. And yeah. All right. So be well. I'm going to end the live stream here. Thanks everybody for tuning in.